Welcome to Socializing Security, where every week we have a discussion about security, compliance, and beyond.
Our goal is to learn and grow by socializing each week's topic with each other, our guests, and with you.
A quick compliance note, this podcast is meant for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal or regulatory advice.
We're glad you've joined us, and we hope you'll learn along with us. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Socializing Security. Milu, it is good to see you again.
Yep, happy to be here. How are things going for you at the moment?
Pretty good. I realize I said the word see you, and a lot of people may be consuming this as our audio feed for the podcast. So just a note that we do post all of our episodes on YouTube as well. So there's another place you can go and watch. We don't tend to be visual in this podcast too much, but know that you can watch us talk if that's what you want to do. And if you're watching on YouTube, hi, it's good to see you again. But anyway, we're here with our weekly chat about security and compliance. This week we want to talk about security and how security and compliance are not only the domain of cybersecurity experts or compliance experts or lawyers or the network people or whoever you in your organization see as being in charge of security. Security really is something everybody has to deal with. As is compliance. Compliance is something everybody has to deal with. And what your role is may look different on how you do that. But it is important for all of us to truly understand what's going on those fronts.
Yeah, I think when we think about security and why it's so tricky for organizations to implement effective security programs is mainly because you can't just bring in superstar security talent and then assume that the entire organization is secure. Your security program is only as strong as your weakest link, and truly any of us are potentially susceptible to clicking a link or accidentally sharing something and inviting somebody into the network without necessarily the intention to. We are all an attack vector, basically, unfortunately, because of this human element of us just potentially just clicking or reading something too fast or not slowing down maybe, and then suddenly we've fallen for a phishing scam and the entire corporate network is under attack. So that's kind of where we're coming from when we say that security is everyone's responsibility. Obviously, great if you have a superstar security team. We love that. We love seeing organizations invest in their cybersecurity resources, and that's a huge portion of it. But really, it does come down to making sure that you have a culture of compliance and security within your organization that involves active training, constant communication, and solid reporting for people to reach out if they have questions or if they think they might have gotten something fishy, that they know exactly who to reach out to before they accidentally click something.
Yeah. And to just draw an analogy to the quote unquote real world, we're all used to having to badge into a door, and there's been a lot of focus on don't let people tailgate through those secure doors to make sure that the physical space is secured and that nobody's getting into the secure areas that they shouldn't be. And we see that with like janitorial staff that generally wouldn't be allowed in there, but they have a role to play in the office, and that means they need to have access to it. Sometimes some of them have better access than some of us that actually work there during the day. But we're very conscious about the fact that we don't want that to be a potential attack vector. You have to be thoughtful about the fact that the people who work in that space and have that level of access aren't a vector of compromise and can't allow people in. You see this in movies all the time where they've got to sneak in and they're, hey, we're gonna get a job as a janitor there, and we're gonna sneak people in, when we go to take the trash out. Is hijacked movies type of an approach. Very real world, very physical in that regard. And when it comes to the cyberspace, it's a very similar story. We don't want people to be able to accidentally let somebody in or to have somebody hijack the credentials that allows them to get in and be able to get in that way. And the smallest role in the organization still has access, and sometimes they just need very minimal access to be able to compromise and move laterally and be able to to do really bad things. It doesn't take much for a lot of them because they're really smart that way.
Yeah, and I think we also see there's certain classes of employees that are more susceptible just because either their positions are riskier, so just like finance, they're definitely targeted more frequently with potentially with like fake invoices or potential like click to pay links and stuff like that. As well as then new employees are a really common attack vector for malicious actors. So because potentially maybe they haven't done their information security training yet. A lot of companies wait, like they give employees about 30 days to complete their training. So maybe newer employees might be an easier place to target because maybe they haven't, maybe this is their first like technology role or something and they're not used to information security training, they haven't done it before or something like that. And so they're not used to either what to look for this particular company or who to reach out to ask for questions. They're a really good target. And that's why I've seen a lot within organizations, it's usually unfortunately the newer employees that are targeted and fall for it quickly because they're less used to asking their like colleagues about being like, hey, like is this a normal request from our CEO for something, or so and so asked me for something I didn't know. I think we've seen a lot of times within organizations for a lot of the longstanding employees, they're used to asking about being like, hey, I got this thing, did you get that? They're like used to asking their teams within a different communication channel about being like, hey, did you see this fish? Or suddenly they'll like ruin a phishing simulation campaign or something because suddenly they're talking about it, which is kind of the goal, right? You ideally
Yeah.
want people to be like, hey, this is super weird. Did you see that email? And they're like, oh, don't click on it. And that's usually some of the more effective. But if you're new, you might not like have that camaraderie. You might be like scared to ask.
Yeah. I definitely had that experience with my most recent job onboarding. Was the first time I sat down in front of my email, I already had what looked like phishing emails sitting in my inbox. And I'm like, did they enable my inbox and then purposely run a phishing attack against me, or did I just happen to come on right as soon as they were doing one, or have people actually found my email address before I even had it? Was an interesting experience, and definitely had that experience of, hey guys, is this something I should expect? Like, is this normal behavior? And to this day, months into the job, I'm still asking questions about what's the normative behavior in a lot of different places, not just with phishing type scenarios, but just hey, whose responsibility is this normally? Should I jump on this right away, or should I wait for somebody to ask me to do it? Those types of things are normal when you're onboarding, and to me, having to wait to have that security training, whether I do it on day one before I am allowed access to my email box, which is maybe a best practice that companies need to start adopting, or I wait 30 days. Honestly, I've done it at other companies many, many times over at this point. So, that security training isn't doing a whole lot other than to reinforce what I already know. But it seems bad to me that we rely on that security training in order to enable people to be able to do those types of things. Like, should we be having that conversation during the first few hours, because it has become such a critical thing? It's, you fill out your paperwork for your taxes, you fill out your paperwork for your health insurance if you're here in the US, you fill out your paperwork for whatever other benefits you may have, you do your security training, and then now here's your email address. You can now get in and do the things that we hired you to do after several hours of doing this kind of onboarding stuff. So I guess let me turn this back to you a little bit. And you've done a lot of these types of training types of things, helping with both compliance and security training. And a lot of us on the other end tend to look at it as, well, this is a necessary evil. We have to do this thing because they said we do. We have to click the box and compliance and all these things. Are we doing am I, as an IT administrator, doing a something that's maybe too negative by saying it's a necessary evil? Do we need to change our behaviors on that front and make it more of a positive thing?
It's tricky because training, I think, regardless, like has always seemed as like kind of a drag for employees. It's usually felt like it's an extra thing that, a lot of team members already feel like they're really busy. And then it's really hard to get certain teams that already feel burnt out to be like, oh, hey, by the way, like your required mandatory training is due and you need to go spend, really easy to have a new hire who's like probably has some free time because they're like figuring out their system access and they, probably wouldn't mind spending an hour like, doing an informative training. I think it's harder with existing employees, especially if your content isn't like fresh. If it's staying the same, then it's really hard for people to be like, great, let me sit through the same, 3 videos and click through and take the same quizzes I'm used to. I would always recommend, hopefully, that if you're using like external training, that you're refreshing your curriculum like every year. You should not have users do the same training over and over again, because it's just not an effective way to train people.
I'm pretty sure that one of the training courses I had to take with this new job was the exact same content, slightly different, probably focusing on different things than the last company used. And that's unfortunately a sign of, maybe we don't have enough variation in that training. But it was kind of hilarious and a little surreal to sit down and I'm like, I know I've seen this show before.
Yeah, which I mean is fair. I do think there are a couple large players that are building out the training that a lot of companies rely on. So it's not super surprising if you switch organizations, if they're using kind of some of the larger like L&D providers, then it's pretty common that they might have the same materials. But I would say within the same organization, for sure, you definitely don't want the same curriculum over and over again, because you're just going to just see that buy-in and engagement drop off. I would say things you can do to get creative around it is, right, create incentives around compliance that are potentially like rewards for people that are doing it within a certain amount of time, or add that like kind of compliance, that carrot stick approach, where this would be the carrot where you're rewarding positive behavior for those that didn't let it go past you, where you're like, hey, you did your training on time, you're getting a swag package from your compliance team, or whatever it might be. It's a small thing that might actually help people have buy-in. You could also do like, we want to encourage people, maybe not the fastest, because maybe you're then encouraging really people to just like fly through the content.
Yeah.
But again, like the first 10 people that are going to complete it in the new campaign, which potentially then, if you can get executive team buy-in about being like, hey, this is really important, but we also want people to adopt it quickly and do it, and see some fun and the importance about doing it, I think starts to build that culture around the importance of security awareness training, because it is a necessary evil, but you might really want to just make sure that people want to do it, and also that you're enforcing it. I will say it's very common too to see organizations just have a lot of people that are very past due on their training.
Yeah, and that's also important on the culture side of things, because I've had bosses that were like, yeah, I haven't gotten around to that yet, which then tells me that it's not important for me either. And it's classic managed by example type of situation. Make sure that you've done it so that you can go to your people and say, I did it. It wasn't bad. It was this, it took 10 minutes. It was pretty engaging. I would recommend just setting aside 10 minutes at the beginning of the day, just knock through it and you'll be good to go. But then there's those that, you have a culture of people being like, what's the most creative way we can find to avoid it? And that's not a healthy way to go about it, especially being that it is critical to everybody's job, which, maybe there's a space for the security awareness training to be in compliance training. And, even when we start talking about things like the non-harassment type of training, to be more tailored to our different roles, because we do have different responsibilities. We do have access to different systems and data and need to have different perspectives of that. Like maybe I need a training that helps to identify, as I sit in a technical marketing role, yeah, your product marketing people are going to be sending you emails like this, but your boss's boss is not going to send you this. The CMO is not going to send you this thing. And that was one thing I did get with this new job is my C-level executive going deeply into it and saying, hey, everyone, just so you know, this is the kind of thing you'll never see from me. I will never ask you to do this or that. And make sure that the group knows what that normative behavior is, so that, it's a little bit like with deep fakes and everything, there's recommendations that make sure your family has a safe word, so that if you get a call from me, I'm putting air quotes around that, that you can justifiably say, Brian, what color is that cat we used to have? And that I give the proper answer to that. And, again, it's kind of like what was your first car when you go to unlock your password?
Security questions.
Yeah, those security questions that some of them are pretty easy to find out. What's your mother's maiden name? Well, I never picked that one because that one's pretty easy to find. And so having things like that, you don't have to give the right answer. But as long as everybody knows what the right answer is in that scenario, I now have a way of verifying that the person is the right person. So that all goes into play with that normative behavior of making sure that the people who could potentially be asking you to go buy, $500,000 worth of gift cards to send to somebody would actually ask you that in a manner that they would ask you about it. Obviously, that's a bad example because that's a ridiculous ask from any C-level executive. We need to get over that being the example because that's just an easy one to laugh at. But it happens. And that's the sad part, is that it happens if you don't set those ground rules within the organization. So I think, the standard stuff that we're used to seeing, coupled with conversations with management as to what you should expect, what you shouldn't expect in that particular job role, I think is the right way to go about it.
Yeah, and then I think also just regular communications from whether that's IT, compliance, security, whomever is potentially like orchestrating the training. I would actively encourage regular communications about whether that's like a recent breach that employees might be interested in, or again, like the expectations about being like, hey, you're never going to get this request from so-and-so person. If you do, you need to like verify with them, and this is how you could do that. And again, encouraging that like no one's going to get in trouble for asking, to being like, hey, did you send me that email? Or hey, IT, I got a password reset. Is that usual? Like I think those are some of the more likely ones we're going to see now, with a lot of organizations are doing phishing simulations, but it's because a lot of them are based off of very targeted attacks, such as, basically getting what looks like a password reset where somebody actually then puts in their credentials without realizing, it's has nothing to do with the corporate IT system. And some of these look exactly the same. Like they've really, really hard to discern. And so thinking through what are the standard ways that you're going to do a password reset, that actually might be something really great to just train on a regular basis from your IT team about being like, hey, if you have to reset your password, this is what it's going to look like. And if it doesn't look like this, like reach out to us, because it's probably not from us. And training people on those types of like specifics for your organization that go beyond just being like, don't put your password into something you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I found one thing that I came across in the last couple of years was, I don't even remember what site it was, but as part of setting it up, they said pick an image. And I'm like, okay, well, that's really weird. And then when I really kind of started to think about why they would ask that question, I realized, oh, it's a way for me to verify that they are the proper site. And so, pick a picture of a ball or pick a picture of a cloud. And for whatever reason you pick that one, just remember that that's the image that you picked. And when I go to log into that site, it says, and here's your verification image or something to that effect before I ever type anything into that box, so that I can be like, wait a second, I never would have picked the ball because I like clouds much more. And that's a kind of a sneaky way, I guess. I really snuck up on these, the way why I say it that way, of being able to say that that site is the right site to be typing into. And I love that concept. And I'm surprised it's such an easy thing for a site to do. I'm surprised I don't see more of that. And that is because we are so concerned about making sure you're, the verification is really only one directional in a lot of cases. The website is trying to verify I am who I am before it shows me that stuff. And very rarely do we think about it the other way. So I think that is super important. And that kind of takes me to one of the other points I wanted to talk about, which is really about, every system, every tool has a security angle, because generally we're logging into every system, every tool. So whatever tool I happen to be using, I could be using Camtasia to do video editing. There's a security angle to that, because I need to think about, as I'm editing these videos, I'm just the video editor. It doesn't matter what I do. I don't have to think about security because I have to go edit video all day. Well, if you're editing video that could potentially have sensitive information that is on that video, whether it be screen captures for a demo, or you're walking around the office recording some sort of casual conversation that you want to put out on the website as to, hey, here's our culture and look at how all these people are happy and they've got all of these snacks over here and that kind of thing. If I'm a video editor, I may be the last line of being able to look at this and do something to stop it and say, wait a second, that needs to be blurred. Or we walked by that whiteboard that happened to have something, username and password written on it, and we need to somehow get rid of that so it's not shown. Every system, every tool has some level of data, of information that is potentially dangerous. Otherwise, why would we have the systems? I mean, if they're not doing something to help move the business forward, which means they've got business critical data associated with it, you need to be thoughtful about who has access to it. And no system is we'll just leave the doors wide open.
Yeah, and I think when we're thinking about, yeah, I mean, there's obviously there's criticalities when we talk about like system access and data that they have, right? So there's certain systems that have access to highly restricted sensitive information. Those need to be considered critical and they need to be treated as such, which means maybe their security controls are stricter than maybe something like a tool that has access to information that is going to become publicly available. Because in the worst case, if it gets breached, right, it's like, well, it was marketing material we were going to release publicly anyways. Is not the end of the world, as opposed to this is our IP, our trade secrets, our code base, whatever it might be, that requires better enhanced security. So I do think also when we're thinking about security within an organization and thinking about security being everyone's responsibility, we do also need to be mindful of that different people have different levels of access, and those that have more sensitive access should be required to either have more training or more technical skills really related to security and awareness about reporting issues, because they actually are probably more prone to have maybe not more prone to attack, but the damage could be significantly worse for somebody that, you know, is a super admin, for example, that has administrative privileges to big systems that are critical to the company. So I think thinking through also, is your security awareness and also just like your training and incentives and the entire program, is it also set up to making sure that we're thinking through who are actually the riskiest people? Again, finance comes to mind. That's a team that's usually a very large target and might actually not have the most like technical from a security like perspective, very technical from the financial perspective, but might actually require more hands-on training of realizing like, hey, you know, you are going to get more frequent messages because of the seat that you are in.
Yep.
You are going to be prone to more attacks because you manage the money.
Yeah, HR is another classic example of that. You know, having access to a level of data that even internally you don't want that information getting around because of that. One area that, due to my day job, I've been focusing on a lot more is sensitive data discovery. Like, how do you know where all the sensitive data is? And how do you know if it leaks out? Data loss prevention comes into this as well, making sure that, you know, random person isn't going to be emailing out sensitive information that shouldn't be leaving. Like, hey, you just sent this file that has salary information in it to some random email address. Like, let's go ahead and stop that. That doesn't seem like it should be going this direction. Those are interesting areas that, you know, data loss prevention has been there for a long time. Our ability to search through all the information on a file server has been there for a long time, but it's becoming more of a focus as we start to think about these. We refer to it as a blast radius. Like, what's the amount of damage that could possibly happen if this person gets compromised or that system gets compromised, and making sure that, you know what, there's no reason that social security number shouldn't be there. I heard a story about a customer who, and I'm going to try and obviously obfuscate the story a little bit, but they had access to a system and it was valid access where they would run a report every week. And due to some limitation in the system, they were downloading that report to be able to read through it or consume it or whatever. And for like a decade, they had been throwing this into a network share. And most people didn't have access to it because it was personal drive. But once they did the search and were able to just actually crawl the file system and found out that, yeah, this guy's got 10 years worth of social security numbers or whatever it was in his personal drive, if he gets compromised, all that information is now available for, you know, a decade plus worth of data. And that was a scary realization for that company, because that's a massive hole. And so they were able then to be able to use that information and be like, okay, cool, we need to block the ability to download the PDF version of this and make it so that it is more consumable within the interface, so that it doesn't become an area. And of course, you know, some training came out of that to say, don't store things on your personal drive. It's best that you just never save it anywhere. Let the system of record be the system of record and leave it that way, unless there's another system that needs to process it for some reason. So every one of those systems, every one of those tools we use has a potential security angle. And to your point, whether you be in IT or in the legal compliance space or in the finance, HR, any of these other areas that may not be technically focused type of people, they need to be aware of what these dangers are and what they could be potentially exposing the company to in a way that is uplifting rather than punitive. You know, we don't want to make people feel punished because they had to go and take a training because they failed a phishing test. Like, that's the worst way to go about it.
Yeah. And I mean, again, there's like only so much teams can do. I think coming up with a comprehensive training strategy that is also scaled to your business, ideally tailored to risk level for the individual employee, that like certain teams might need more either one-on-one training or more training, whatever the organization decides, but also make sure you're enforcing the training. Again, it's very, very rare that everybody has done their training, but it like, which isn't great. And again, it is a liability thing for companies too. It's better for the company if they can basically prove that everybody's been doing their training, but also it's just like creating a repeat reminder for team members about being like, hey, this thing happened in this organization because of a weak password. Like, let's make sure that we're still using our password manager and, you know, using the complex passwords, storing them there so you don't have to remember them. Like, just coming up with repeat tracks for people to be like, oh, right. Like, because a lot of the times, again, people are busy. They might just have forgotten that the company gives you access to a password manager or something like that. Or they didn't realize that they weren't supposed to be storing them like in Google Chrome or something instead of like the password manager, because no one took the time to remind them of that, or the training didn't go into that depth, you know? Yeah. So I think there's opportunities for organizations to be thinking through what are the people actually using in their day-to-day and how can we actually like reach them without just doing the bare minimum and being like, hey, you did your InfoSec training and you're good, you know, because really that's great if everyone's doing their training, awesome. But again, that doesn't mean someone's not going to fall for a fish. So like, it's then thinking through, okay, we're doing an annual training. Maybe we should be doing monthly phishing simulations and like testing people and then rewarding them if they do report it correctly. Or then if they fail a couple times, maybe that means they do need to meet with the security team and just have a hands-on training as opposed to like another just, you know, sit back and relax and click through training, you know, thinking through what are the actual escalations, because again, security, you're only as secure as your weakest link. And unfortunately for us, we are the weakest link. It's us.
Yeah, that's unfortunately what it comes down to is humans are the weakest link, but we can also be the strongest piece of it if we're smart about that. So kind of a quick conversation, probably a lot of knowledge a lot of people that listen to this probably already have, but you know, sometimes it's the basics. The basics matter. We've had that conversation. We've had the conversation of, you know, knowing your vendors and what they're introducing into your environments and being smart about how you introduce them. So we thought this kind of tied a lot of topics we've talked about already together pretty well. It's one of those basic conversations that if you are security minded and you have people in your life that aren't, this might be a good conversation to share with them. And that's what we're really looking for is content that can help people become more secure, be able to view compliance as something positive rather than something that, you know, they feel like they're being
unnecessary
boxed.
evil.
Unnecessary evil, if you will. I was trying really hard not to use that phrase, but yes, some people do view it that way. But we appreciate you, everybody listening, and those of you on YouTube watching. We appreciate that as well. But yeah, it's been a great conversation, Milu. Glad to talk basics every so often. Definitely do enjoy that, and hope everyone else enjoyed it.
Yeah, and if you're past due on your InfoSec training, maybe do your compliance person a favor and go get it done so they don't have to bother you about it.
Just take a few minutes and just knock it out. It'll be for the better.
All right, we'll see you on the next episode.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Socializing Security. We hope you learned a thing or two with us.
If you'd like to continue socializing with us on this topic or have feedback, we'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn or social media. Just search for Socializing Security. Or you can email us at info@socializingsecurity.com.
Until next time, stay social and stay secure.